Hello guys and welcome to the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam final being held in Cape Town, South Africa. So yesterday we had a round robin stage which was won by Javokhir Sindarov, and we will take a look at his game against Parham Maghsoodloo. So they're playing 2 games match, the time control as you will see here 30 minutes plus 15 seconds per move, and Parham starts with white pieces and plays f4. So his king is on f1, he could potentially go castle on the first move, but he plays f4. Hard to understand what's the idea when you first look at this position, but sooner or later it's just basically taking the center. c5 was played, f4, c5, I mean wild moves, e4, pawn goes to b5, and now finally castle. f6, knight g5, knight f7, knight goes somewhere, maybe h6, maybe d6, maybe first push and then d5, knight d6, b3, knight c6, knight c3, queen b8, potentially pointing towards this pawn, and also threatening to play maybe bishop c7, bishop g4, e6, blocking the d7 pawn, and now knight d2 with the idea of playing d4. Castle, c4, takes, bishop a5, king h1, I mean d4 was never played, rook d1, and now d3. Basically playing very solid with white pieces, not letting black take any advantage due to some weaknesses, because d4, I mean c4, e4, you kind of have to deal with it. Bishop f3, knight goes to a7, and the idea maybe is to strike with d5 at some point. Knight goes to h5. What's interesting about, let's say, this first pairing is that Javokhir won the round robin stage and Parham lost all 7 games. And of course, you would have some psychological advantage just because, I mean, when you lose 7 games in a row, of course you feel tilted. But those are very strong gems, and we already saw in previous events when the huge favorite, big, like, let's say, underdog and would lose. That happened with Keymer Vincent, who was picked. I don't remember by whom he was picked, but he ended up winning the whole Weissenhaus event, so you never know what might happen. And actually I was looking at this game, and in next few moves Javokhir is going to make some mistakes. Knight g6, and now bishop f6, brilliant bishop sacrifice, with the idea of deflecting this pawn, of protecting this knight, and the point is g takes f6, f5, and 2 knights are under attack, the position is completely lost. Rook f6, knight f6 takes, and f5. And at this moment it looked like, okay, Parham is taking an advantage in this set to win his first game of the event. King g7, f take g6 is a mistake because you kind of opened the file, but knight g3 would have given white that winning advantage, because after knight j, knight h5, I mean, it looks horrible. King f7 takes, and then queen b2, which is a bit wild. I don't think it can be played on even on this level, because it's just extremely hard to find, with the idea that this knight cannot be captured due to bishop h5, bishop e8, and I mean white just have too many rooks. Bishops are terrible, so it would have been a win. But after f takes g6, h takes g6, guess what? Potential problems along h file. So queen f4 was played, trying to trade queens, takes, and now knight goes to f7, g3, knight f5, king g1. And, you know, despite white having more material, I mean, it's a bit complicated to play, yes, I mean, but your rooks don't have enough activity, you can't really put any pressure as of right now, so it's easier to play with black, like to move pieces around. So, h4 was played, bishop c6, bishop e2, and now bishop goes to a5, and guess what, bishop is coming to d4. Bishop c3, king f3, f5, takes, and now d4 is played by white, takes, rook d4, had to sacrifice, and now after knight f7, Javokhir is taking the advantage. And let's take a look from the black side now. So, knight h5, king goes to f8, king f3, king f7, knight f4, and rook goes to j8, attacking this pawn on g3. Rook goes to g1, knight h6, knight g4 plans, knight d3, king f6, knight f2, e5, g4, and f4. And now it's very interesting because black have 2 passers in the middle of the board, while white have 2 passers on the edge of the board. And who's gonna be first? King d2, and now knight goes to f5, using the pin along g file. So g5, king f7, knight g4, e4, knight f6, rook b8, and rook is coming from a different side of the board. e3, king d3, and now knight h4. Rook f1, knight g6, bishop h5, bishop g2, and now slowly but surely the advantage was being converted. Bishop f1, rook c8, and there is nothing that white could really do. Rook g8, and Javokhir ended up winning this game. He won the second game as well and ended up winning this match and is through to the semi-finals. The second match was very interesting as well. Levon Aronian was playing against Hans Niemann, and that was an exciting match. So the first 2 games finished in a draw, and then they played another 2 games, and let's see what happens. So Levon, white pieces, plays e4, classical move, and we have a5 on the board. f3, f3 of course never played in classical chess with the normal position because it's just simply a bad move, but in the following case it's not that terrible. So knight e6, knight goes to b3, knight goes to b6, and now a4. So when you see that, let's say, knight is on b6, b3, g6, g3, it's usually a good idea to potentially try to, you know, shake things up, because you have an idea of, let's say, going a4, a5, h4, h5, h5, h4, a5, a4, to move the knight back, to get it to a vulnerable spot. So d6, pawn goes to a5, knight d7, and guess what happens? You see? Already a huge advantage for white pieces. Pawn goes to d4, f6, d5, and Levon got a lot of space. Knight f3, pawn goes to b4, c4, even though the king is, you know, kind of in the middle of the board. Guess what might happen? So we have g6, bishop c2, bishop d2, h4, queen f2, and now, let's say on the next move, white can play short castle. But of course, Levon decided not to do it. The position is closed. He might just keep the king somewhere around on b1, or let's say bring the second rook here and just try to attack the king. But the problem is for white is potentially that, let's say, bishop e7 this, bishop f7, and short castle this side. And while you spend a lot of time rerouting pieces here, you know, the castle might already happen, and you will attack absolutely nothing on the queen side. So it's sometimes it's just getting wild in freestyle chess. So you gotta wait what black will do with the king. So rook a3, queen a7, knight d1, knight goes to c3, knight a4, and now, as I said, short castle, g4, g takes h5, and rook g1. But Levon left some pieces on the king side, so he is still pointing towards the king. So rook g8, rook c3, and he tried to attack on the king side. Now he switches to the queen side, knight g6, he takes d6, and now knight b6. And Levon was getting very comfortable position. Rook f8, bishop a4, bishop h6, rook c1, takes, f5. So now this pawn is under attack, and there will be a few interesting things during the game. So bishop goes to d7, takes, and now knight h4. Rook c7, queen f6, rook b7, rook g2, and we'll get to a very interesting thing shortly. So bishop goes to g6. Computer thinks it's a blunder due to bishop h3, which wasn't played on in the game. Bishop f5. Discover attack, rook f7, bishop g6, king g6, rook f7, queen f7, and now queen c8. And here, after queen f3, suddenly it turns out that black are completely winning. But it's hard to see why when you look at this position for the first time. Let's say queen g8, king h6, king g5, queen g8, and now knight g6. And queen simply moves to b3 and ends up checkmating white's king. So, but instead of that, knight f3 was played in the game, queen a6, trading queens, and now Levon was out of danger. They had no time left, so knight d2, king f6, h4, knight f3 was a final blunder, because after rook f1 it turned out that the piece is simply lost. Rook g3, king a2, and now this knight is lost, because after h3, takes, the pawn is just not on time to promote. King h2, knight comes back to d5, king walks all the way to c4, pushes b5, and wins the game. And just like that, Levon ends up beating Hans, and Hans is eliminated from the quarterfinals. That was actually the final of the last event. I think it was in Las Vegas. Levon and Hans played in the finals, and now they're meeting each other in the quarters. So The next pair was Vincent Keymer and Arjun Erigaisi. So, Arjun picked Vincent, and once again, guess what happens? C4, B6, B4, E6, E3, F5. I mean, technically, you can't even castle neither short side or long side, because I mean the rook placement is just horrible. So you have to do basically knight d3, bishop c2, knight d3, bishop b2, queen c2, queen d3, and then castle long. That's how it works. So knight d3, knight f6, h4, knight d6, knight f5, knight f7, takes, and now long short castle from black, and h6. So Vincent pushed his pawn all the way to h6, g6, queen b2, rook e8, and now knight goes to f3, potentially going to g5, and you know, this suddenly becomes a huge problem. So bishop f3 was placed, bishop f3, c6, and now b5, c5, g4. I mean, the game is already wild. So what potentially, let's say, Vincent wants, if black get too comfortable on playing on the king side, he might just go, let's say, long side, and you know, his king will be safe. So takes, d5, bishop b2, d4, f4, knight d4, and suddenly, I mean, I would really think of castling long at some point. Bishop f6, queen c2, knight d6, bishop f3, queen c8, rook h2. I mean, Arjun had some advantage during the game. Bishop c6, rook goes to d8, queen b3, knight d7, bishop goes back to g2, and now e5 was a blunder, and suddenly the things turn around. Bishop goes to h3. Guess what? e6 square is suddenly weak, and yeah, I mean, it's just a bit insane that e5, and after bishop h3, it turns out that there is no good square for any piece to cover e6 square, and why just simply win an exchange? Because let's say even if knight f5 is played, I mean e4, and you use the pin. So huge blunder by Arjun, because after bishop e6, e4, king b1, I mean, this rook is just terrible. King b7, rook g2, king f8, e takes d4. Now this rook still cannot move. Bishop d4, and now trades. And after f5, it turns out that knight f5 cannot be played due to rook f5 takes and rook g7, and white will win a queen. So g takes f5 was played, king d1, and now queen comes all the way to h5. King e6, queen h5, queen b8, rook g7, rook h7, and now rook e7, and the game is basically over, because h7 is coming, rook f5 is coming. There is nothing that black can do. Queen g6, and no matter what happens in the next move, Vincent is gonna slide his rook to f5, f6, f7, and win the game. And just like that, he is through to the semis as well, and will be facing Levon Aronian. But who will be the opponent of Javokhir Sindarov? Let's find out, because Magnus Carlsen was playing against Fabiano Caruana. I mean, some of the best chess players in all history are facing against each other in the quarterfinals, not in the final, but in the quarters. And Magnus made a comeback. He lost the first game, then he came back in a must-win situation. And on the tiebreaks with 5+2 blitz time control, they were playing against each other, and let's see what happened. e4, e5. We see a lot of e4, e5, and now f3 as well. Knight e6, knight f3, d6, c3, a5, a4. I think the game between Aronian and Niemann started with some knight b6, and Hans led white push a5 and got the worst position. While you see Fabi here, he immediately plays a5 with the idea of potentially going knight b6. So knight b6, bishop c2, f6, bishop f2, bishop f7, and queen goes to d1, trying to push d4. Queen e8, d4, queen d7, d5, knight f4. And even in this game, as you might see, white got a lot of space advantage, the same way that Levon gained the space advantage in the game against Hans. And after castle g4, knight f4 takes, knight g2, this pawn is suddenly under attack, and you have to protect it. Knight goes to c4, knight f4, and b5. Guess what Fabi tries to do? He is trying to create chaos on the queen side. The idea for Magnus here is potentially to go something like queen e2 and then quickly castle short, because there is not much going on the king side. Anyways, bishop d3, rook b8, queen e2, takes, knight e5, bishop c2, rook c8, and rook c1. That's some interesting choice, because you know, you could really think of something like, let's say, castling short, but it's not the best move. The best move is actually rook c1, and Magnus is not scared of anything. Bishop d8, bishop d4. So the plan is just basically to hold on to this pawn. Bishop a4 takes, king b7, king b1, bishop b6, bishop c3, rook c8, bishop e5 takes, and now knight goes all the way to e6. Bishop d7, rook a3, rook e8, rook c3, and suddenly rook might even go to c6, and the position, I believe, is still completely winning, even though, let's say, black can obviously take, but after b takes e6, the position is still completely lost. So queen goes to c2, rook e7, h6, and Magnus just, you know, smashes Fabi on the chessboard. Queen g6, queen c2, queen f7, rook c6. Finally that happens on the board, and after takes, bishop d4, queen d6, all the pawns are picked up, queen d8, and Fabi admits his loss, because after king h7, skittish! And the idea is queen g6, knight f8, so king has to take on g6 square, and now queen g5, king h7, queen h4, king g8, and something like, I don't know, knight g5 works, or king d8 the easiest. The easiest to win the queen. And just like that, Magnus not only went on to the semifinals, but also won the whole freestyle thing in 2025. I mean, dominant year for the former world chess champion and world #1, but he is going to play Javokhir Sindarov in semifinals tomorrow, and it's gonna be exciting to spectate, considering how things go for Javokhir right now. He ended up beating Magnus in the round robin stage, so let's see if Magnus is going to take his revenge and rematch, and will we see Vincent Keymer versus Magnus, or Javokhir versus Keymer, or Arjun Carlsen? I mean, who will be on top, young guys or old guys? So we'll see tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the recap of semifinals tomorrow. Bye bye.